America and imperialism have become, somehow synonymous. I was amazed when living in America to see how respected the army is.
Even after the fighting, no reconciliation with Russia.
After people getting, killed, raped, beheaded, castrated, there was one person in Kiev Oblast who was skinned alive. After this, going back to what was between Ukraine and Russia, it's unthinkable.
What have you learned since then about what it takes to be a good diplomat?
The most overwhelming feeling was for me as a young diplomat, a feeling of shame.
Are we going to win? Hello, everybody. This is Brian Bonner again, host of Ukraine Calling at Hromadske Radio's beautiful studio in downtown Kiev. Ukraine's war against Russia is being fought on many fronts, and the most important and most critical, of course, is the soldiers at the front line. But there's also a diplomatic war going on, or diplomacy is a part of the war, and it needs its soldiers. They are Ukraine's ambassadors, Ukraine's diplomatic corps, work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And today, I am honored to have one of our top diplomats since 1995, Alexander Sherba. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Alexander is, he's now Ukraine's ambassador at large, in charge of strategic communications, I believe. He was a longtime ambassador to Austria from 2014 to 2021. Before that, he served in Germany, and I believe in the American...
Washington, too.
Washington as well. He's fluent in Ukrainian, Russian, German, and English. He has a Twitter following that I would love to have, 264,000 followers who turn in on his, I think, must-read updates and takes on the situation, today's situation and the changing situation. He also is the author of Ukraine versus Darkness, Undiplomatic Thoughts, published in 2021. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but I hadn't read it until 2 days ago when I knew you were coming on the program. I decided I had to read it because it's too embarrassing to interview somebody who's written a book and not having read it. But I enjoyed it. It's a fantastic book, and I'm sure we'll get into that conversation.
Thank you. You are one of not many people who read it. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, you can just reprint a page on your Twitter feed and you'll have 265,000 readers, and that'll make you a bestseller. But he's a great writer, and I recommend this book to everybody because it walks us through, it takes us through up until 2021, which is, it ends well before, the year before the full-scale invasion. You've been at this since 1995. What have you learned since then about what it takes to be a good diplomat and not a good diplomat?
First of all, I learned that 99% of cliches and stereotypes about these professions and these, mean jokes about it, they are absolutely have nothing to do with the real profession. And most importantly, the joke about that diplomat's tongue serves the purpose of hiding his thoughts. I always liked how diplomacy was viewed by Harold Nicolson. That was a very interesting British diplomat in 1930s who wrote a book, Diplomacy. And he... part of this book is just what it takes to be a good diplomat, and number one thing in that list of what diplomats should have is truthfulness. And I was amazed by that, and ever since I just thought about it, contemplated that, and I realized that how right he was. Yeah.
Well, yes, truth has been a in short commodity from the Russian side, but that brings us to, we have battlefield updates every day, how the war is going. How is the diplomatic war going? Because as you know, Russia is sparing no expense to sow division and disinformation around the world. Where are we doing well, and where could it be better?
Well, it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, of course, it's amazing how unanimously, or at least almost unanimously, the Western political community and the governments and for the most part, the societies have supported Ukraine. I had sometimes the feeling that many countries of the world, especially those who were involved in World War II, had these, historic flashbacks in their minds right away. I mean, Poland, for obvious reasons, the United Kingdom remembered the Blitz, Germany and Austria remembered what it feels like being in ruins, basically the whole of Europe. It is on a positive side. I think this it's not only political impulse, it's also emotional, historical, and it makes the West our ally. On the negative side and minus side is what I see in social media, what I see in Twitter. Sometimes you have a feeling that tides have turned and all of a sudden the world isn't with us anymore, and the battle for hearts and minds is being lost. Then you look at the surveys, sociological surveys in the Western countries, and you realize it's not the real reality. 70% of the societies are still with Ukraine, but unfortunately, due to efforts of Mr. Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson and etc.,
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, we have this kind of situation where in social media, in this let's say dimension, we aren't as successful as we wish we would be.
Is it fair to say diplomacy at war boils down to three things: securing allies, countering disinformation from Russia and enemies, and convincing allies to give Ukraine the weapons it needs?
Absolutely. Very well put. Countering Russian disinformation turned out to be a very
job.
difficult job, which leads to securing the help for Ukraine being a very hard job. So the number 2 and number 3 are very much connected.
I'm interested in what you learned about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and our diplomatic corps during the course of the war. I think one of the lessons everybody learned was we have some weak spots in the global south, particularly Africa and parts of Asia and Latin America, that didn't really they wanted to stay out of it, basically, and they still want to stay out of it. Now, I read the other day that we're going to open embassies in several countries in Africa, maybe elsewhere. What's behind this push?
The West has overslept the decline of its reputation in the global south. It's not only in global south, quite frankly, in countries like Austria. I mean, I cannot describe you how many times my conversations that started as a conversation about Ukraine-Russia war and how terrible Russia is, in 5th or 10th minute became, but what about those Americans? Even Austrians were just bad-mouthing America. And throughout the world, somehow America and imperialism have become, somehow synonymous, which is absolutely unfair, I think. Partly fair, but for the most part not. And America, the West, have overslept it. I once spoke to a very good South African journalist who is amazed about Ukraine and who loved Ukraine, but he says, please, for God's sake, don't mention that you're fighting for European values, because for us, European values are colonizer values and the imperialist values. So we and by we I mean the West, the collective West, and I don't think it's a negative thing to say collective West. It's just the more collective we get, the better. And in particular, Ukraine, of course, we have to somehow mend the situation, although it will be a very, very, very long uphill fight.
Is it a smart idea to open up embassies? How many countries do we have embassies in approximately? Do you know?
Diplomatic missions. We have diplomatic missions, 50-something, but not counting, of course, the missions where basically the ambassadors are in charge of, but stationed somewhere else. I think 54, 58.
But there's 190 nations in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, just like the war front line is 1,000 kilometers more, actually. Yeah. The diplomatic front lines is all over the globe. Do you think, is the ministry getting enough talent and money to field more embassies across the world? Is it doing okay budget-wise?
It's spread very thin, of course, and it just. But even, I look at American diplomacy, I look at French diplomacy, for instance, the countries which are represented in all of the countries, and even they are facing problems. Even their reputation and their interests are under attack in African countries and in many countries of global South. So even if we first of all, we should open these embassies. We are, making up for all the time lost, we Ukrainian diplomacy on that front. But it will be a very, very long fight. And yes, of course, it's very much depending on the talent. I do hope that, and I see this interest in young diplomats or even people coming from outside of the system that have been invited, who want to work in those difficult countries. So I hope it will be useful. But again, our expectations and our enthusiasm shouldn't get out of control here.
Do you have to, maybe if you're talking to Brussels, you position yourself Western values, and the United States maybe position yourself maybe the same way. But then with the global South, India and South Africa, do you have to position yourself differently? I mean, maybe as, a victim of an aggressor, or what approach works the best?
I spent most of my career as a speechwriter before becoming ambassador. Right. So my job was finding the right words. And it's very natural that in a space that is very different from the West, even in the Western countries, you should pick your words differently in every country. But as I said, all of a sudden, European values, something so positive, something so, loaded with enthusiasm here in Ukraine, all of a sudden, I just make it this discovery that for some countries in Africa, it's absolutely negative. So, yeah, we have to act there differently. I was just absolutely out of the blue invited to a very interesting conference in India in February. And it was coincidentally on February 24th, and everybody was talking about Ukraine, of course. And I was addressing this very skeptical, audience, and I said, what? You have been the crown jewel of your empire. We have been the crown jewel of our empire. Your empire came to its senses and withdrew. The empire to which we belonged went batshit crazy. Can we say batshit?
You can say batshit crazy.
Batshit crazy. So please be more sympathetic and maybe less talking about, walking this thin line between good and evil, but maybe picking the side of good. I was surprised. People started applauding. So that's the kind of words that would work, for instance, in India, in my experience. And in every country should be respected. But basically, it's not like we are, bringing a new version, a different version of Ukraine to every country. We just find the different way to explain one and the same truth.
Well, early in the war, Kenya's representative to the United Nations struck me. I wish I could cite his name. But basically he said, in Africa, since, the colonialists drew our boundaries. He said, if we wanted to continue fighting over boundaries, we would have endless war in Africa. Well, they almost do now in many nations. And so the time has come to say, listen, whatever your boundary is, internationally recognized, like Ukraine's, that's it.
That's it.
That seems to be. I think that's very persuasive in Africa.
Absolutely, and even better situation they have in Europe, where the borders, the national borders, are not basically in many situations not relevant anymore. And it's one of the things that make this whole war absolutely insane for Europeans. If once you live in a reality where you all respect the same, values and the same play by the same rules, all of a sudden it makes insane to claim these are our historical territories. We will take it back like Russians do. This is the 19th century thinking, and not the 21st century. In 21st century in Austria, you drive on a road, and on the right side of the road it's Austria, on the left side is Slovenia, and nobody gives a damn about it.
You write insightfully in your book that reminds me of a passage where you said basically Russia and Ukraine, with all the centuries of proximity and relations, answered the question about the future two different ways. Ukraine one way and Russia the other. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's the reason why these two nations that have been so similar in the beginning of their way, and that would be the moment of Soviet Union falling apart, became so different, because one nation was looking for its future in its past, and the
That
other
would be
nation,
Russia.
That would be Russia, and the other one it was looking for the future, where the future should be, ahead of it. Two nations were basically not happy with what they had. One nation said it's all America's fault, and now the West's fault, and now we split with the West, and we deny it and reject it, and things will get better for us. And for Ukrainians said, maybe too much of it. Ukrainians said it's our fault. We made bad choices in the past, and we are so imperfect in so many ways. We want to become better, and we want to become better in the same way as Poland did and as Czech Republic did, because we saw how it works. So these are the two paths taken, but by these two nations that were indeed in the beginning rather similar, but we see now that they are eons away from each other.
And you're a Ukrainian who, much younger than me, more than 10 years younger than me. A lot of people are younger than me now.
Isn't it maddening when
well,
everybody is younger than you?
It's the way it goes.
God.
And
Finally, someone is older than me.
I'm trying to go to 100. But you've lived, you grew up in the Soviet Union, basically. Yeah, until your 20s, I believe.
Yeah.
You're 53 now. Your professional life and education was in post-independent. Is this break irreversible? We're never going back.
Yeah, define back.
Back to the Russian Soviet mentality, the closed society mentality.
I cannot imagine. I had a friend, a politician, with whom I had this talk, and he said, "You know what? There is this Croatian or Serbian, study that proves that no matter how hot and passionate hate is, it doesn't live longer than 15 years." For some reason, somehow they figured it out that exactly the 15 years, and after 15 years, it's smooth. It's more smooth, and people don't care as much as they did in the beginning when this erupted, this negative feeling. But quite frankly, for me, it's unthinkable. I cannot imagine, after what has been done, after, after people getting, killed, raped, beheaded, castrated. There was one person in Kiev Oblast who was skinned alive. After this, going back to what was between Ukraine and Russia, it's unthinkable.
So even after the fighting, no reconciliation with Russia?
Well, some kind of, living next to each other is inevitable, but all the positive things that connected these two nations, my mother-in-law is ethnic Russian. She grew in Russia till she was 17 and then came to Ukraine. So she's a very passionate Ukrainian citizen. But originally she is from Kursk Oblast, a small town called Glushkova or Glushkov, founded by Ukrainian Cossacks in a very, very distant past. And I showed to her how this town and this part of Russia was sending off Russian soldiers to fight against Ukraine with music, with enthusiasm, with everything. She cried. I mean, I don't know how you get over this. It wouldn't be possible for her, to look at Russia the same way, although originally she is from there. So I don't know, but who knows?
I think even your book, even before the full-scale war, you said it would take generations. But then that pretty much, unless there's a big sea change in imperial thinking and Russian President Vladimir Putin's thinking and his successors' thinking, aren't we going to forever then be what Zelensky said, the big Israel, perpetually at war? And don't we need to reorder society along those lines? And where are we at in restructuring society?
Well, I think after this war, we will become, we will have a lot in common with Israel in the way that we should be ready and very, very much aware that there is enemy right next to us. But I also, I'm not an expert on Russia, and I have been wrong on Russia more often than I was right. But I liked very much what Vladislav Surkov once wrote about the system Putin, and that was that the strength of Putin's empire is in the deep unconditional trust between the deep people, what he calls deep people, the people outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, and the supreme leader, quote unquote. And not any supreme leader, but this particular supreme leader. So once this supreme leader is not there anymore, I do hope that this, evil system in Russia will start to crumble one way or another. Unfortunately, as long as Putin is in charge of Russia, and basically which means alive, we will have a very, very tough time.
Here's a diplomatic challenge. You have many of them. I mean, Ukraine wants everything from the West. I mean, justifiably so. I agree that the West should give Ukraine all the money and weapons it needs to win, and that should be the strategic objective, victory, not just holding their own. But incumbent on that is that Ukrainians do everything they can also to win. And that's come under fire a little bit by politicians and diplomats in the West who say, hey, you need to field more soldiers. You need to lower your draft age. You need to show that you're doing everything as well into the fight. Do they have a point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We need to... I meet with, I have a friend who left his comfortable life in Austria. He had a very, comfy job, posh salary, everything. He left everything to fight in Donbass. a Ukrainian from Bila Tserkva. And I meet with him on a very regular basis, not as often as I wish, because he's fighting, but every time he has a possibility and is in Kyiv, we meet. And quite frankly, I see this, sadness in his eyes and his attitude when he, who gives everything for Ukraine to survive and to win in this war, and he looks at people walking by and having their, usual lives. It's not okay. We in Ukraine, we need to wake up and to realize that, oh my God, everybody should contribute much, much more, and we all owe these soldiers, and we all need to be in one way or another these soldiers, and it's happening in the country, but not as fast as should be happening.
We still have a ways to go.
Yeah.
Sweden, even, they haven't fought a war since 1860, I believe. They have this thing called all societies defense. It comes to the defense of the nation from 18 to 70 years old. So that would include me if I was Swede. Doesn't mean they're at the front line. It means that they are in obligatory service of some kind. And I can see where we could use that at the front now, because they're furiously digging. The soldiers are trying to fight and dig defensive trenches. Is that the kind of service you see? And Israel takes people from 18, and Russia takes people from 18, by the way.
I don't know how it will be after the war. Probably there will be obligatory military service, and probably it will be not like in my case, where I studied a certain military profession at the university, which was the translator from Russian into German.
Right.
In Ukraine, finally.
Well, that's a service.
Strangely enough.
A skill.
Yeah. And then for 30 years I wasn't really, called into army or to somehow update my, skills and knowledge. It shouldn't be that way. First of all, men should be, called into army on a regular basis, and the army should be more like American army. I was, first of all, I was amazed when living in America to see how respected the army is. I will never forget this moment when I was standing in some line in front of this Washington Monument in the Washington downtown, and there was this group of American soldiers, young guys, on jogging by, a group of military unit. And the whole line, and it was a long line, started exploding. It was like, a moment from American movie when just one little boy starts clapping, and then 100 people are clapping along. So one thing is we need a big respect for the army, and it should be the most respected profession. And second of all, what I was amazed about was how smart American army is. For us, very often in Ukraine, and it comes from the Soviet Union, serving in army was, a moment in life when you had to face the incredible stupidity of life, And in America, I will never forget General Petraeus. Back then, he was the commander-in-chief in Iraq, coming in front of Congress. I think it was 2006, explaining things to senators and congressmen, and absolutely turning around the whole, view of political class and of the society. And he did it in such a smart, lucid way. And I want my army to be like that. I want it to be David Petraeus' army.
Right.
Yeah.
Something to aspire to. Yes, we haven't had a draft in America since 1973, I believe. And And it is volunteer. It is paid well. I mean, the State Department is the poor stepsister to the Defense Department, which gets $1 trillion a year. The State Department gets way less. But I've come to understand that big military budgets are essential when you have evil in the world. It seems to me another thing, and I have no connection to never been in the military, but generals I talk to say the reason why military service and fighting is not so scary to American soldiers is that we arm them well, we train them well, we put them in big units where the chances of death or the chances of death are low, the chances of survival are high. And that seems to be some of the fear that Ukrainian soldiers have as they assess their chances as not, or it's Ukrainian men who don't want to serve. Do you see that fear?
Well, it's a completely different situation right now because we are on an onslaught of a country that is much bigger and much more powerful than ourselves. America will never be in that position of being attacked by someone much bigger and much more powerful than America. But yeah, I understand. And there are two ways for Ukrainian men to fight today. First, to volunteer, and second, to be drafted. And those who volunteered, they are already fighting. Now it's time for those who would be drafted. And I think part of the men would be scared. Everybody would be scared, but someone would be, hiding and running away. But a big part of the society won't. And big part of men of age of conscription would absolutely go if they are summoned. If the president comes to the front and says the speech that your country don't ask what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. Many people will follow this call and will go to this war. I absolutely see this readiness and this, feeling of patriotism among at least my circle.
You write too about and you personalize them, the early victims of Russia's war against Ukraine, the 2014. The first casualty in Crimea, Rishat Ametov. And that's a name, you did it deliberately. You wanted to personalize this. And the first SBU colonel who was killed by Gherkin, I believe.
Yeah, Gennady Belichenko, yeah. The first blood, yeah.
You go around Kiev and we have a lot of what used to be Soviet statues that are destroyed and demolished. Should we erect statues of our new heroes?
I don't think we will, quite frankly. I don't feel it in the air that there would be, we would emulate somehow what we did during the Soviet time, but in a different way. There will be a different way to honor their memory. And first of all, and I'm a big fan of this project, we need the Ukrainian Arlington near Kiev. I lived in Alexandria, Virginia, near Washington, and I drove to work, drove by the Arlington Cemetery. This is such an amazing, dignified way to honor the fallen. This is what we need. We need this kind of memory, not just putting standard monuments in every village like people did in the Soviet time.
Yeah, I understand you there. Arlington National Cemetery.
Yeah.
You're right, and I agree that the EU and America, the West, did not wake up to the threat of Russia, and that was by 2021. Are they awake now, or do they want to reconcile somehow?
They are awake. They are not. They are learning to be courageous again. Because the West was learning in the last 3 decades was that we live in a time where it's okay to be soft. It's okay to be, to be at ease. We live in a time where there are no problems that cannot be resolved in a peaceful, diplomatic way. And they were right. The 21st century should be this kind of time, civilized time. The thing is that such a big country as Russia and a couple of others, but most importantly, Russia has never arrived in 21st century. And now the West is learning to be courageous, and it's learning from Ukraine. And unfortunately, it's not happening as fast as it should be. I quote in my book this 2016 survey, or 17, where nations of Europe were asked, are you ready to fight with weapons in your hands for your freedom? And the answers, the level of readiness in different countries was very,
low,
surprising.
Surprisingly low.
In Italy, I think it was 16%. In Austria and Germany, it was around 20%. But in Finland, surprisingly, 73%. And in Ukraine, Ukraine was ranked second. So some countries need to, to rise to the occasion and to become more courageous.
Finland's a fascinating story. What keeps you up at night? Do you worry that the West, after year 5 of the war, is just going to cut Ukraine loose like Syria, like Afghanistan, like Vietnam in America's case?
First of all, my insomnia keeps me awake. And unfortunately, I entered...
It doesn't get better with age, I can tell you that.
It doesn't at all. But what hurts me, and I'm speaking not as a representative of the ministry and not for Ukrainian diplomats, in my absolutely personal capacity, what hurts me and shocks me is this disarray and this, polarization and many insane things that are happening in the United States. And the outcome of the upcoming election, that would be definitely the night I won't sleep.
Oh yes, we'll be up at that same time. You've seen a lot of ministers of foreign affairs. Who is the best one?
You mean in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Oh God! No, I'm not. I won't walk into that.
Who is the worst one?
No.
See, folks, he is diplomatic. He knows diplomacy when he needs it.
And that's more not being a diplomat. It's more being a bureaucrat.
How did you survive being in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during Yanukovych's time? I mean, you must have seen all the ugliness around you.
Yeah, but surprisingly, it was a time when you were in a position where some things would depend on you, you would make a lot of difference because you were the one keeping it together in a crazy time for the country, and keeping the course. And I thought that was my mission. Plus, during the Yanukovych time, I was diagnosed with cancer, so I had my own Maidan, I always say. So it was a crazy, very, very difficult time in many ways, professionally and personally. Yeah. So
your health is fine now?
It's fine now. Yeah.
Congratulations.
I was lucky. Yeah.
No, that takes center stage. You write also, and we all know, because our people who hate Ukraine hammer us all the time with corruption and bad governance. We understand it, but there's a big difference between being a democratic country that is really trying to be better and one that is not democratic and is a source of evil. That's Russia. But you write that Ukraine's people have outgrown their elites, and the elites have not requited themselves well. Are they doing better during the war?
The amazing thing was, at least in the beginning, in the first and early stage of this war, even the bad elites became better. Even the corrupt people were trying to behave decently. It was amazing to see, the guys who were, who had zero reputation, whatever, asking, where can I bring the money? Where can I contribute? Buying stuff for the army. That was one thing, that one of many, many, many things that struck me in that unforgettable time. Whether the Ukraine is improving elite-wise, at least I'm looking at Ukrainian diplomacy. I remember in 1995, You know what the most overwhelming feeling was for me as a young diplomat? The feeling of shame. Because as a young diplomat, you have to be like a fly on the wall. You have to just, your function is just to take notes. And you're sitting there and you think, what is he saying? It's not the right thing. It's not how you convince the West. It's not how you represent the country. It's not right, the words. And I hope that now the people who are taking notes after me don't feel that measure of shame. And I think that many of our today's ambassadors, and it is a part of political elite, are more competent and fluent in foreign languages and less embarrassing than it was in the beginning of.
I don't have to be as diplomatic as you. I think Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing a great job, especially for the resources it has. And I know a lot of talented people. I think Kuleba is doing a fantastic job. I like Klimkin because he was there at a very tough time for us in Ukraine.
He's a friend. Both of them are my friends, so I'm very proud of them. Yeah.
And you wrote about Ukraine needs a Václav Havel or Angela Merkel. I'll agree with the Havel part. Merkel part, I don't. But
yeah, that was. I wouldn't write this passage now
today.
Yeah, absolutely. But back then, I'm a faithful person. I believe in God, and I'm a Christian, and I just, I think I see united democratic Europe and as a fulfillment of, as the attempt of this, largely still Christian Europe to finally live by the commandments, at least by 2 or 3, which would be forgiveness, which would be humility, which would be serving the strong ones, serving the weaker ones. And I saw all these 3 things in Angela Merkel, and the humility of this person amazed me. But of course, now I understand and I see that...
she was lured by what you said, money, and that's...
She was not corrupt.
Well,
I mean, she was corrupt.
The Nord Stream 2.
Yeah, but which she thought she was doing, and she was doing a good job for the German economy. German economy prospered amazingly, on this, cheap Russian gas. But in strategic terms, that it was not readiness to listen to Ukraine was a crime. We see it now.
So have we found our Václav Havel, or maybe we need hundreds of little Václav Havels?
Václav Havel, yeah. It's a dream not only for Ukraine, quite frankly.
But we're getting better.
We are getting better. We are getting there, yeah.
Yeah. Parting thoughts? I think we're going to have to leave it there. Are we going to win the war?
Well, you know that we will win. I think we already won because we stopped this... we didn't crumble when the world crumbled. We didn't hide under the blanket when the whole world hid under the blanket, And so in a way,
blankets. Yeah, that was your famous speech with Petro Poroshenko. It said you can't fight with blankets.
Yeah, and this is, by the way, the thing that Donald Trump likes to quote all the time. You Democrats, you were just supplying them with blankets, but me, I gave them javelins.
Yeah, well, you helped Donald Trump. There's that. Well, I'd love to talk longer, but we are out of time. Get this book, Ukraine versus Darkness, and Ukraine is going to beat darkness. Undiplomatic Thoughts. The guest is Alexander Sherba, Ambassador at Large for Ukraine. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it, folks. I want to thank you all and ask you to watch us on YouTube. Check us out on the Hrmatsky Radio website and tune in wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, help us out. And we'll be back next week with another great show. Thank you and goodbye.